Good morning, Year 6. I hope you're ready for today's English lesson. We are going to start with some grammar. Can you identify which of these are similes and which are metaphor? Okay, so he was as slow as a snail. Miss Taylor is a star. He looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards. The dog was a statue staring at the squirrel. Jack was acting like a clown. And Francesca was a swan dancing across the stage. Okay, which are similes and which are metaphor? Okay, I don't really want you to write anything down for this. I just want you to use your brain and have a think. You can note things down if you want, and we will go through the answers in a minute, but I want you to see if you can work out which are which. Okay, let's have a look and see which go where. So he was as slow as a snail. So hopefully you have remembered that similes use the words like and as to indirectly compare something to something else. So he was as slow as a snail is a simile. Okay, Miss Taylor is a star. We're not using like or as in this particular sentence. We are directly comparing Miss Taylor to a star. She is not literally a star, clearly, because that would be a burning ball of gas, but it is indeed a metaphor. He looked like he had been dragged through a hedge backwards, like obviously, is a simile. The dog was a statue staring at the squirrel. So it's giving us the idea that the dog is like still staring at the squirrel. That's a metaphor. Jack was acting like a clown. He's got the like in there, so like a clown. And Francesca was a swan dancing across the stage is, of course, a metaphor. Hopefully you managed to do that, or you spotted the pattern and you were able to follow it. If you did that, fantastic. Similes are kind of easier than metaphor. If you can remember that metaphor is where you compare without using like or as, then you're on a winner. Okay, let's have a look at today's word of the day. So today's word of the day is the word generosity. Okay, it comes from the noun generous, which is on our on here, okay, and it means the quality of being kind or generous. Okay, it's a thing, generous and generosity, and you can also use it as an adverb by putting an ly ending to describe how you gave something. So if you gave generously, it means you gave a lot. Okay, so let's see if I can write a sentence today. Right, let's have a think. The class were overwhelmed by Mrs. Ferguson's generosity when she bought them all ice creams at the end of term. Okay, there we go. Don't hold me to that though. Okay, so there is my sentence. The class were overwhelmed by Mrs. Ferguson's generosity when she bought them all ice creams at the end of term. You need to write your own sentence now. You can magpie mine. You can write one of your own. I do want you to write this down, and I want it to be submitted with the rest of your work. So you might want to pause. I'm going to give you maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do this. Don't take ages over it, and then come back to the video. Okie dokie. Right. So today we are looking at using inference as a writer. Okay. Now, we talk a lot about inference when we're reading, and it's one of our key skills that we do look at, and it's something that can be quite tricky. But using it as a writer is not something that we've really looked into. So today we're going to start seeing if we can be authors who use inference as well. But first up, we need to read chapter 10 of Oliver Twist. So I'm going to read now. You can read along with me. You can just listen. Please make sure, maybe you might want to listen out and see if you can hear any examples of inference as we go along. Okay, so chapter 10, in which two of our characters lie at death's door. Oliver reeled back into the scullery and fell against the wall directly beneath the little scullery window. Hand took hold of his collar, and he was lifted up and backwards, dragged bodily through the window and slung across Sykes's back. The two thieves ran back across the lawn, bundled their burden over the garden wall, and kept running into the night, lugging Oliver along like a sack of loot. Forced to stop and catch his breath, Sykes cursed the figures that came on in hot pursuit. "How the child bleeds," he said in disgust. "They're gaining on us," yelled Toby. "There's dogs and all. Let's split up. Leave the boy, Bill. Save yourself." So, laying Oliver down in a ditch and throwing his old brown cape over the body to hide it, Bill Sykes plunged away, leaping over a farm wall as he went and cursing like all the devils in hell. The butler and the under-butler from the big house both outran their courage at about the same time. It's wonderful how rage can make heroes out of the most ordinary people, but in the end, their bravery washed off like the rain, and both men were secretly glad to break off the chase and turn back for the house. An icy rain was teeming, rattling on the muddy cape, but Oliver did not hear it. A chill worse than winter had crept into his limbs. A blackness darker than the night had enveloped him. Oliver was woken by the sound of his own groans. He knew that if he did not stand up and move, he would die. Somehow he dragged himself out of the ditch and stumbled blindly on through hedges and across fields until he glimpsed the lights of a house. As he crawled closer, he realized, with dread and despair, that he'd come full circle to the very house where he had been shot. Too late to look elsewhere for help. Tugging on the bell pull, Oliver sank down in the porch, more dead than alive. Voices washed over him. "That's him! That's one of them! Get him inside! Call the police! Call the mistress! Call a doctor or he's done for! Oh, it's only a child, no more than a boy! Fetch the police anyway, he's one of the thieves." The entire household filed into the bedroom. Miss Rose Maylie, her aunt, her butler and under-butler, and the parlour-maids. The doctor, wearing his most serious face, asked, "Are you quite sure, Miss Bailey, that you are ready to view this desperado? He is not so very fierce just now, it's true, and I don't believe he will frighten you too gravely." "I'm ready, doctor," said the young lady nervously. The curtain was drawn back to reveal Oliver asleep. His head rested on his arm, cheeks flushed with fever, and his long golden hair streamed across the pillow. The doctor's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Oh, what are we going to do?" cried Miss Maylie. "How could there be any wickedness in this poor child? Perhaps he was forced into helping the burglars. Or even if he wasn't, what do we know of the sufferings that drove him to it? How do we know what kind of loveless, miserable life he has led, with no one to love him or teach him right from wrong? Oh, we can't give him over to the police, Aunt. We can't." And she burst into tears. "Well, of course we shan't, my dear," exclaimed her aunt. In fact, everyone was agreed, so that when the police arrived, they found no one to arrest. "A mistake, officers. We were too hasty in calling you. A boy, officers. What boy? No boys here. Sorry to have troubled you. Let us show you to the door." When Oliver woke, he found himself in paradise, or somewhere very like it. The house was set in gardens, the garden in countryside, and the countryside in a softly curving corner of England, as fresh and pretty as a painting with the paint still wet. The loudest noise was birdsong, or the piano where Rose Maylie played and sang. The smells were of new-mown grass, wild flowers, blossom, and country cooking. Oliver was treated with such kindness that he might have been a returning hero rather than a burglar's boy. He tried to repay that kindness by getting up early each day, by fetching and carrying, and by using his very best manners. But the harder he tried, the more loving the old woman and her niece became towards him, so that in the end he thought he might live to 100 and never be able to repay their generosity. They listened to his life history, and though thousands would have called him a liar, believed every word. They found him a teacher to help him with reading and writing, and pretty soon Oliver was able to read from the Bible each evening to Rose Maylie and her aunt, which made him as proud as the greatest preacher in the land. Far away, in the workhouse where Oliver had once lived, a very old woman sat bolt upright in the bed and screamed, "I'm dying! I must tell someone what I did. Fetch the matron, I must tell her." Mr. Bumble had never realised before how many teaspoons Mrs. Corney owned. He was very taken with her furniture too. Mrs. Corney had been called away to the bedside of a dying woman, one of the paupers in her charge. Left alone in the parlour, the beadle took the opportunity to admire everything in the room. As matron of the workhouse, Mrs. Corney lived rent-free, he supposed. A widow with 30 teaspoons, eh? And living rent-free? Bachelor might do worse. In fact, it was enough to put Mr. Bumble into a highly romantic mood. The lady herself was not best pleased to be called to a deathbed just when she was serving tea to a dashing gentleman caller. She muttered, climbing the draughty stairs, "People ought to get on and die without disturbing their betters." This particular dying pauper was a midwife. At least she had helped many babies into the world during her years in the workhouse. At the sight of Mrs. Corney, she heaved herself up off the pillow and began to confess. "I should never have done it, matron. She was cold and hungry, poor child, but she still hadn't sold it. Through all her hardship, she kept it round her neck until the day she died. She whispered to me, as she lay dying, 'Give it to the child and tell him to pray for me, to forgive me.' But it was gold, wasn't it? And she was dead, and I was tempted. I took it and never let on. But it preyed on my conscience, it did. It preys on my conscience still. It was this bed, this very bed where she died, and now I'm a-dying. God forgive me. I must make amends, I must. Find the child. Give it to the child. Give it to little Oliver Twist." Breath caught in her throat. The old woman fell back against the pillows, and Mrs. Corney went back downstairs to her visitor, clutching the delicious secret to her breast. Oh dear. At least Oliver's okay. That's quite a good thing. Okay. Inference. Okay, let's have a look. What is inference? Have a 30-second think to see if you can remember and come up maybe with a definition that describes inference for me. Hopefully you are saying something along these lines. Inference is where we bring in things we know from outside the story to help understand what the writer means. For example, this example here, he clenched his fists and ground his teeth. What does that tell us about the he character? You clenching your fists and grinding your teeth, you're probably quite angry or annoyed, okay? So we know that clenching our fists is quite a threatening movement. And we aren't told that in the story. We bring that in from our knowledge of human nature and body language, okay? So that is what inference is. It's understanding. It's that reading between the lines to be able to infer what is actually going on. Okay, now we're going to have a look at page 56 and 57 as it turns out. And we're going to see if we can use our inference skills to decode what's going on in this particular scene and find out what's happening. Okay, so here it is. It's page 56 and page 57. So Let's have a look. Oliver reeled back into the scullery, fell against the wall directly beneath the scullery window. Now, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of the last chapter, it did say he'd been shot. So we're not really using our inference skills here because we don't have to. It goes on. The two thieves ran back across the lawn, bundled their burden over the garden wall, and kept running into their night. Now, here, the word burden, sorry, got overexcited, tells us that that Oliver isn't like a loved member of the team. They don't really want to save him. He's a burden. It's something heavy that you have to carry. It's a sort of quite a negative word to describe something you've got to carry. So that tells us that Bill Sykes, and Toby don't really want Oliver, but can't leave him behind because, of course, remember, they're worried about Oliver spilling the secrets of what they're up to and dobbing them into the police. Okay. This here, we've got a lovely simile, lugging Oliver along like a sack of loot. That's a very nice idea. Sort of the idea that, you know, they can't leave him behind because who would leave loot behind? Loot is another word for like precious valuables. You see a burglar in the cartoon where they have striped jumper and they've got a sack. Loot is like the things that they are stealing and getting away with. Okay. How the child bleeds, he said in disgust. Again, using inference, we can tell that Bill does not care about Oliver. He's not saying it in concern, he's saying it in disgust. So although it's telling us how he's feeling by using the word disgust, we're not reading between the lines to understand that. What we are using inference for is to understand that Bill doesn't really give a hoot about what happens to Oliver. Okay, they're gaining on us, yelled Toby. Right. The butler and the under butler from the big house both outran their courage about the same time. Okay. Outran their courage. It's kind of a metaphor. They're kind of giving up and they're getting a bit worried. They are frightened of the burglars, and they don't really suddenly they're realizing what they're doing and they don't really want to catch them. Okay. It's wonderful how rage can make heroes out of the most ordinary people. But in the end, the bravery washed off in the rain, and both men were secretly glad to break off and come back to the house. Okay, so here we go. Their bravery washed off in the rain. That's a metaphor again. Okay, and it tells us that actually they're not really that brave. They were just, when they got excited, you know that thing when you get really excited and you think, yeah, I can do it, and you try something and you think, why on earth did I do that? That's that sort of thing. Okay, so we're using inference to see that they're not thugs, they're not up for a fight, they're actually a little bit scared. Okay. Now this bit here, an icy rain was teeming, rattling on the muddy cape. But Oliver did not hear it. A chill worse than winter, again, nice, okay, had crept into his limbs, but blackness darker than the night had enveloped him. Now, can you use your awesome inference skills to tell me or tell someone, even if you're talking to a don't mind, I do it all the time. What do you think that tells us about Oliver's state at that particular moment? Yep, he's dying. It's bad, okay? He's very cold. It's very dark. It's not literally dark, okay? But he feels like this darkness is enveloping. It's the idea of where you're going to pass out, okay? You're going to become unconscious because of the pain. Bear in mind, he's been shot and he's bleeding. We know he's bleeding because it tells us over here on page 56 he's bleeding. So you need to use those inference skills, those things that you know from outside the book, things that you know from life, to be able to understand that it's looking really bad there. Okay, so in those ways, using those skills, we've been able to decode what's going on in that scene. The fact that Sykes and Crackit care not about Oliver. He is a burden to them. He is a problem. They can't leave him behind because they're worried that he'll tell the police and the people in the house what's going on. We can also understand that the people who are chasing the burglars, they're not really after them. They're not really up for catching them. So they're not really a threat. But we also know that Oliver is in a very serious place. He's been shot. And we know from this part here, the chill and what have you, that he is dying. Okay. Now, that also tells us that when he does come to, he knew if he didn't stand up and move, he'd die. Okay. So it goes on to be a slightly more explicit, just in case you haven't understood that. Okay. Right. Okay. So those are examples of us using inference just to dive a little deeper into a narrative, into a story, and understand what's going on. But how about using inference as a writer? Now, you might think, well, hang on, Mr. Ferguson, we don't use inference as writers. Yes, we do, but we sometimes, and previously lower down the school, you might have called it show, not tell, okay? Show, not tell is inference. It's the same, okay? But we call it inference in reading, and we tend not to in writing, and I don't know why, so we're going to, okay? We're going to call it inference. So let's have a look at using inference as a writer. Well, why not just say what you mean? Why be mystical and you know, make our readers work a little bit harder to understand what we're meaning? Why not just spell it out? Well, let's have a look. I've written a couple of sentences. Have a look for me. Which do you think is more interesting? Oh, no, I won't. So which is more interesting? The cat was grumpy. Boom, says it. Or the cat flicked out its sharp claws and swished its tail, hissing. Which one is more interesting? Now, I know you year six. There are a few jokers out there who will say, Mrs. Ferguson, the first one is, you are entitled to your opinion. However, I prefer my purple sentence. It's a lot more descriptive, isn't it? I've got a vision of the cat in my head. If you tell me the cat's grumpy, I'm like, okay, it's grumpy, but I can't really see that cat. Not really. It might be sitting. Might be one of those sad cats, you know. But here, the cat flicked out its sharp claws and swished its tail. I know a bit more. And hopefully, as a reader, your readers will also know that a cat with its claws out and a waggy tail, unlike a dog, is not a good thing. Bad thing. Cats switch their tails, they'll run away. Run away. Here, I've put, by using inference, it's like we're treating our readers with respect, okay? Readers don't like to be spoon-fed everything. They want to challenge. It shows that we are respecting their intelligence by using inference to keep them ticking over, keep them going, okay? If we wrote in those orange sentences all the way through our writing, it gets really dull and it doesn't push our reader, and it doesn't give them enough to work with to really get into a story and kind of sink their teeth into it and get to grips. It's the reason why you don't go back and read maybe those stories that you read when you were 3. The dog is blue, the cat is green, the cat sits on the mat, because you're beyond them and they're boring because you can read them easily. And using inference shows that level of complexity in your writing, and that you are also appealing for a reader who is at the same enjoyment level that you are. Okay, so in your writing, you should always aim to respect that reader and to try to pitch your story at the right level. And you need to think about who you're writing for. So to use this in a more general term, when we do other writing, and we'll do other writing throughout the year, you need to think about your audience. Who are you writing for? Because if you are writing a story for somebody in Key Stage 1, you probably wouldn't use inference too much, okay? Because the younger you are, the less life experience you have, and you might not know that a cat squishes its tail when it's angry, okay? But if you are writing for children of your age and older, or adults, you would use more inference because you want to keep them interested, you want to keep them reading your story and getting to the end, okay? So that's why we use it. Okay, so let's have a look at these pages here. Okay, how is inference used in these pages, and what effect does it have? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this bit here. So here we go. The doctor, wearing his most serious face, asked, "Are you quite sure, Miss Bailey, that you are ready to view this desperado? He's not so very fierce just now, it's true, and I don't believe he will frighten you." Now, he's using a serious face. He's using the word desperado. And that, "I'm ready, doctor," said the young lady nervously. The curtain was drawn back to find Oliver asleep. Okay, the doctor's eyes were twinkling with amusement. Okay, so what does that tell us about the doctor? Well, to me, it tells me that the doctor's got a bit of a sense of humour, that he's probably quite a nice character. He was joking, wasn't he? He called him a desperado, which is a Mexican word, I think. But it's a word to tell us that it's another word for a bad guy, someone who's desperate, who's willing to break the law to do something, to get something. And clearly Oliver isn't that. So he's quite a cheery kind of character. And I know that from the way he speaks. Remember, when we're doing our character descriptions, we are talking about speech as well as action and physical looks and things like that. And I can tell from the way he's talking that he's clearly quite a jolly character. His eyes twinkle with amusement. That just backs that up. Actually, okay. What effect does that have on us as readers, and what do you think the author's effect? Well, without going into loads of detail about this character, because the doctor, he's in and then he's gone. He's not a key character. He's not a massively important character in our story. It just gives us a little snippet to round out this person. He's not just a serious doctor, a grumpy doctor or whatever. He's quite a cheery guy, and actually probably has taken a little bit of pity on Oliver as well. Okay, let's have a look at Miss Maylie. So we don't really know much about Miss Maylie, except for the fact that we've taken them in. So we're going to be introduced to a new character, Miss Maylie, and this bit here. So she says, "We can't give him over to the police, Aunt, we just can't," and she bursts into tears. What can we infer from that kind of move, that emotion that she's showing? Hopefully you agree that she's quite soft-hearted and warm-hearted. She's kind. Okay? She's another kind person that Oliver has met. He's done quite well there, and again, it quickly tells the reader that she is a kind character, not like some of the nasty ones we've met, like the beadle and the lady in the workhouse and the funeral director's wife. We immediately know that she's quite emotional, okay, and that excess of emotion, bursting into tears, it is kind of tells us that she's excessively kind, without saying she was excessively kind, which would be kind of it tells us what kind of person she is, and it's really effective at giving your reader, bam, this idea of someone very quickly. Okay, final part of today's lesson is going to be having a go yourself. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I want us to go back to chapter 9, okay? So we're going to use the scene when Oliver went through the window, okay? So before he gets shot, when he gets posted through the window. The reason I have chosen that scene is because there's a lot of emotion going on there, and it's quite a nice thing to be able to think about using our inference skills to describe as and use as a writer. Because when we're using that kind of inference, we can use facial expressions and physical characteristics as well as everything else. Okay, so to do this today, you're going to be using a technique known as slow writing. Okay, and what it means for those who haven't done this before is you are literally writing sentence by sentence. Okay, and what we're going to be focusing on is quality sentences, not quantity. So if you are one of those people that writes loads and loads and loads and loads and loads, this is not going to be the way today. I don't want loads. What I want is really precise vocabulary choices and sentences. So you've got a sheet. The sheet is on the GB primary page, and you have an instruction on that sheet what to include in every single sentence. Okay. As I said before, it's quality, not quantity. Let me show you. So here is the sheet. Okay. Everybody, but everybody, will begin with that sentence in black. Oliver stood beneath the window. Okay. Then you've got to think what happens next. So Bill Sikes is there. He lifts him up. He posts him through the window. Oliver drops down. Oliver thinks, doesn't he, about waking up the people in the house and warning them about what Bill's evil plan is. And then Bill kind of says, you know, don't you even think about it. I've got a gun trained on you. And then Oliver hears the noise of people upstairs, and then he ends up getting shot. Okay? So what you need to do is think about this sentence by sentence. So Oliver stood beneath the window, full stop. And then next sentence, sentence one, you need to use a simile to describe the house. So you might use a sentence like, above him loomed a giant house like, and you need to use a simile. So like a mountain soaring into the sky, or like a big black figure waiting to consume him, or something like that. Okay, take your time, think really carefully about what is going to have the best impact. Okay, the next sentence you're going to start with an adverb. So silently Bill Sikes posted him through the window, or suddenly, or something like that. Okay, the third sentence, you will use speech and a synonym for said. So maybe it can be Bill speaking, saying, don't forget to go for the door, growled Bill Sikes, and you need to make sure that punctuation is all right. Sentence 4 is to use inference, okay, because we've warmed up to it. And sentence 4 is to show Oliver is frightened. So think about what kind of physical characteristics, what might happen to show he's frightened. Maybe he's shaking, maybe his palms are sweaty, maybe he feels cold. I don't know. It's up to you, okay? And carry on and on and on, okay? Only 6 sentences, okay? The last sentence can be free choice, so you can, use what you like. I would really like you to just jot down your ideas first, and don't focus too much on worrying about spellings and punctuation. However, the piece that you hand in you must aim to have spelt it correctly, and you must aim to have punctuated it correctly. So you will need to write down your ideas, then reread it as a whole piece of writing, a whole paragraph of writing, and make sure that it makes sense, that they flow. Okay, so it's not jerky. That okay, oh, actually I spelled that wrong, so I'll go back and tweak it. Okay, is a really good thing to get used to doing, because when we are writers, we are always editing. Okay, if you find this difficult, just try your very best, and everybody's writing will be different. So don't panic and just go for what you can do. If you get stuck, just get in touch and I will help. If you feel that you are a confident writer, think about how you can vary that sentence structure. How can you use perhaps a subordinating conjunction to expand those sentences that I saw a wub of? So if, since, although, because, all those sort of things. How could you perhaps use a relative clause like while or which or whatever, something like that to make those sentences a bit more interesting? Okay, so that is today's challenge. Good luck. Tomorrow we will be having a live lesson, so make sure you come along for that. It's at 9:15. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day, and I shall see you in the morning.